Welcome to the truth, chosen one. You've been walking through a fog, believing the lies they fed you, and now it's time to strip everything down. Welcome to the reality you were never meant to see, the one they kept hidden behind masks of fake smiles and hollow words. You thought you were paranoid, didn't you? Every time you walked into a room and the conversation suddenly stopped. Every time the support you thought you had turned into nothing more than uncomfortable silence. You couldn't explain it, but you felt it, the sudden distance, the coldness, the undercurrents of something much darker. And the worst part? They knew what they were doing. They knew who you were and what you were capable of, yet they chose to play their game of deception right in front of your face. But here's the catch. They never thought you'd see through it. They never thought you'd uncover the truth. They thought you were just another pawn in their twisted little game. Easily manipulated, easily broken. But look at you now. You didn't collapse under the pressure. You didn't beg for their validation. You didn't disappear into the shadows like they wanted you to. No, you stood tall, unshaken, even when they tried to tear you apart from the inside out. You didn't just survive their game, you adapted. You became unpredictable, calm, focused, dangerous, in a way they never expected. And now, the truth has finally cracked open, and guess what? It's worse than you could have ever imagined. They thought they could hide it forever. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be known. Luke 12:2. The whispers, the glances, the fake concern wrapped in layers of jealousy, it was all calculated. It was never about you, it was about their fear of you. You were never paranoid. You were never imagining enemies. You were standing in the middle of a secret operation designed to wear you down, isolate you, and break you. They thought you'd crack. They thought you'd burn out. But instead, you grew stronger. And now, here you are, ready to witness the truth they thought would stay buried. So, brace yourself, because we're about to rip the veil off everything. The universe didn't pull you into this moment by mistake. You were chosen for this. And trust me, what you're about to uncover will change everything. Get ready for the biggest revelation of your life. This is no accident. They knew what they were doing, and they knew exactly how to keep the truth from you. For years, you've been living under a cloud of lies fed by those you trusted. Those who pretended to have your back while they secretly conspired against you. The truth wasn't just hidden. It was deliberately buried, wrapped in layers of manipulation and deceit. They crafted a narrative, a false story designed to break you down bit by bit without you even realizing it. They smiled in your face, spoke in your ear, and made you believe that everything was fine, while behind your back, they were planning your downfall. The whispers weren't just rumors, they were strategies. The looks you caught weren't accidental, they were calculated. Every word of concern was a well-rehearsed act. They built a world of half-truths around you, convincing you that you were the problem. They thought they could control the narrative, push you to the edge, and break your spirit. They thought you'd never see it. But here's the truth they never expected you to find out. They never thought you'd peel back the layers, that you'd wake up to the truth of what they were doing. They underestimated you. And now, everything they tried to keep hidden is coming to light. The lies they wove, the mask they wore, it's all about to unravel, and you're standing right at the center of it all, finally seeing the game for what it truly was. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:14. This was never a coincidence. The deception was deliberate, and you were meant to be the one to uncover it. And now that you've found the truth, there's no turning back. They were all actors, weren't they? They smiled in your face, laughed at your jokes, praised your work, all while carrying out a secret agenda behind your back. You thought they were your friends, your colleagues, even your allies. But it was all a show, a performance designed to keep you in the dark while they plotted your downfall in silence. The most dangerous part? You couldn't even tell. Every interaction was wrapped in a false sense of warmth. The casual greetings, the "how's everything going?" The fake support, the half-hearted smiles, they all masked a darker truth. They weren't concerned about you, they were studying you. They weren't building you up, they were gathering ammunition. Their smiles were weapons, carefully crafted to disarm you, while their true intentions were quietly taking root. It was almost poetic how well they played their parts, wasn't it? They knew exactly when to deliver the right words, the right tone, just enough to keep you from questioning them. The joke they made, the encouraging words they said when you were down, the pats on the back when you succeeded, all designed to keep you in line, to keep you ignorant of the truth that was unfolding behind your back. And you bought into it. Because why wouldn't you? They were your friends, your circle. How could anyone suspect that behind those smiles, behind that laughter, was a silent war being waged against you? They thought you'd never see it. They believed their masks were foolproof. They assumed you were too trusting, too naive to recognize the tension hiding beneath the surface. But here's the thing they failed to grasp. You weren't blind. You might not have had all the pieces yet, but you could feel the change. You sensed the distance, the shift in energy every time you entered a room. The conversations that would suddenly stop when you walked in. The subtle change in tone when your name came up. The awkward silences that followed when they thought you weren't paying attention. They thought they were clever, didn't they? But their actions were louder than their words. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be known. Luke 12:2. They never imagined you'd pick up on the signs. They underestimated your ability to read between the lines. They thought you were too wrapped up in your own world, too busy chasing your goals, to notice the quiet war being waged in the shadows. But here's the truth. You felt it long before you could put it into words. Their smiles weren't friendly. They were carefully constructed facades, meant to hide the truth of their hatred, their jealousy, and their fear. They knew what you could become, what you were already becoming, and that terrified them. But what they never expected was your resilience. What they didn't count on was you surviving their quiet war. And what's worse for them? The truth is already slipping out. The walls they built to protect their lies are starting to crumble. And now, you're seeing everything they tried so hard to keep hidden. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:14. Here's the harsh reality they never prepared for. You didn't break, you didn't beg, you didn't fall into the trap they so carefully laid out for you. In fact, you did something they could never have anticipated. You adapted. While they were scheming in the shadows, thinking they could wear you down, you were quietly building strength. They wanted you to collapse under pressure, to lose your resolve, to become the very thing they painted you as. They expected you to burn out, to get desperate, to crack under the weight of their relentless manipulation. But you didn't. Instead, you became a force they could never control. They thought the isolation, the gaslighting, the backhanded comments would break you, but all it did was sharpen you. They thought that by keeping you in the dark, you'd shrink, get smaller, become easier to manage. They underestimated the power of your spirit. They thought you were weak, but in reality, you were just biding your time, learning, observing, evolving. You didn't make the mistake they hoped you would. You didn't attack. You didn't start lashing out. No, you watched. You remained calm, focused, and steady. And that alone terrified them. The longer they tried to break you, the stronger you became. They underestimated your resilience, your ability to withstand the pressure without ever losing your composure. They couldn't understand why you weren't falling apart like they expected. And it's because you weren't like them. You weren't fragile. You were unshakable. No matter how hard they tried to weaken you, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. They played their games, their manipulation, their mind tricks, but you didn't crumble. You adapted to their cruelty. learned how to navigate their web of lies, and kept moving forward with a calm that they couldn't understand. The more they pushed, the more you grew. The harder they tried to break you, the stronger you became. You didn't just survive, you thrived. You learned to handle their attempts to tear you down without ever losing sight of who you were. You didn't allow their deception to define you. And now, they're left wondering how you're still standing. They're left in shock, grappling with the uncomfortable truth that their entire strategy failed. You didn't just endure their games. You turned every attempt to destroy you into a lesson, a stepping stone to becoming the person they never counted on. That's the uncomfortable truth they never thought would come. They underestimated your strength, your resilience, and most importantly, your ability to adapt. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. They thought they had you figured out. They thought you were just another pawn in their twisted little game. Someone who could be easily manipulated, controlled, and discarded when the time came. They expected you to burn out, to get exhausted from fighting a war you didn't even know you were in. They thought they could keep you on the edge, constantly questioning yourself, constantly doubting your worth. They believed that by wearing you down, by pushing you to the brink, they could force you to shrink, to bow down, to beg for their approval, or, at the very least, for the truth. They were wrong. What they didn't count on was the strength that lay deep within you. A strength they could never break, never manipulate, never control. They thought that when they turned up the heat, when they isolated you, when they whispered their lies behind closed doors, you'd collapse, that you'd eventually crack under the pressure and beg for release. But what they didn't know is that you were never the one on the edge. You were never the one about to break. Instead, you became something they feared even more: unpredictable, calm in the face of their chaos, focused while they were scrambling. You didn't burn out, you adapted. You grew more resilient as they pushed you harder, and that's the one thing they couldn't control. The harder they pushed, the more you evolved. They wanted you to snap, to lose your mind, to crumble into chaos, but instead, you remained steady, dangerously steady. And in that steadiness, they saw something they couldn't face: your power. Every attempt they made to weaken you only strengthened you. Every lie they told, every attempt to gaslight you, only sharpened your awareness. The more they played their games, the more you learned how to outsmart them, how to step back and let them reveal their true selves. You didn't react to their provocations. You didn't get caught up in their drama. You simply kept moving forward, calmly and with purpose, because you knew that in the end, their chaos would consume them, not you. For the righteous man falls 7 times, but rises again. Proverbs 24:16. They were terrified of the fact that you didn't break. You became everything they couldn't control. They wanted you to feel small, insignificant, like you had no power. Instead, you grew into something they could never tame. They were desperate to push you into the corner, but they only pushed you closer to your own inner strength. You became the storm they couldn't predict. You became the force they never saw coming. And now, as they sit in the wreckage of their failed attempts, they know the truth. They couldn't break you. They couldn't shake your foundation. And they can't control what they no longer understand. That's the fear that haunts them now. The fear that you are no longer the vulnerable target they once thought you were. You are a force, and that's a threat they'll never be able to handle. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1-7. They wanted you to be the easy target, the one they could predict, the one they could control with a few words or subtle manipulations. They thought if they kept you in a state of confusion, uncertainty, and isolation long enough, they'd eventually force you to crumble. But what they never realized was this: you weren't going to break. In fact, you didn't just survive their games, you transformed. And that's what terrified them most. Instead of becoming a shadow of yourself, You became unpredictable. You stopped reacting the way they expected. Every time they thought they had you figured out, you shifted, you adapted, you surprised them. Your silence was a weapon they couldn't understand. Your calmness in the face of their chaos was like a mirror reflecting their own instability. The more they tried to provoke you, the more they tried to force a reaction out of you, the more you refused to play by their rules. They couldn't pin you down because you refused to be pinned. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. While they were scrambling to keep up with their lies, you stayed focused, staying calm in the middle of the storm they tried to create. You learned how to navigate their manipulation without losing your center. Every move they made to destabilize you only revealed their weakness, while your calmness became a source of strength. Your clarity was a silent but powerful force, one that stood in stark contrast to their chaos. But here's the kicker. You didn't just remain calm. You became dangerous. The very calmness they thought was weakness was actually your greatest weapon. You learned how to observe, to watch, and to wait. While they were making all their moves, you were quietly gathering strength, biding your time, and plotting your next move. You were like a calm predator, moving silently but with purpose. And that stillness? It wasn't ignorance. It wasn't passivity. It was strategy. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. They thought their aggression, their pressure, and their deceit would break you. But instead, you took control. You became the one they couldn't predict. You became the one who was in control, even when they thought they were. You didn't need to shout. You didn't need to create chaos to prove your strength. Your quiet resilience, your ability to stay grounded, was the most dangerous thing to them because it exposed their own instability and insecurity. You didn't need to react. You didn't need to attack. The more they tried to push you down, the more they revealed their true colors. You weren't just surviving their games anymore. You were thriving in ways they couldn't comprehend. And now, every time they try to provoke you, every time they look at you, they're met with the terrifying truth. You're unpredictable, calm, and dangerous in ways they never saw coming. It wasn't just subtle, it was calculated. Every word they spoke, every action they took, was part of a carefully designed plan to distort your reality and make you question your own sanity. They didn't just want to control you, they wanted to make you believe you were the problem. Gaslighting, manipulation, and group pressure were their weapons of choice, each one meant to chip away at your confidence and leave you second-guessing everything you once believed to be true. Gaslighting. That insidious tactic where they twist your words, rewrite your reality, and make you doubt your own perceptions. This was their favorite game. They'd say things like, "Are you sure that's what happened?" Or, "I think you're overreacting." It was never about the truth. It was about breaking you down, piece by piece, until you were unsure of what was real and what wasn't. They'd make you feel crazy, like you were the one who couldn't see things clearly. Every time you pointed out something that didn't feel right, they'd dismiss it. Every time you questioned them, they'd act like you were the one causing trouble. But the truth was, they were the ones playing you for a fool. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? Jeremiah 17:9. But gaslighting wasn't enough for them. No, they needed more. They needed to make you feel isolated, powerless, and alone. So they brought in group pressure, an insidious form of control where they made sure everyone around you was on the same page, turning people into pawns in their game of manipulation. At first, it was just small, subtle hints, like gossip behind your back or quiet whispers when you weren't around. But over time, it became a concerted effort to undermine you, to turn people against you without them even realizing it. It was like a slow poison, spreading throughout your circle until you were left standing alone, wondering who, if anyone, was still on your side. They'd gather in secret, organizing behind closed doors, discussing you like you were a case study. They'd reframe everything you said, twist your actions, and create a narrative where you were the villain, the problem, the one who couldn't be trusted. Meanwhile, they smiled at you to your face, pretending to be your friend, pretending to care. They didn't need to say anything outright. They just needed everyone to think the same way, to build a false story that everyone could agree on. This was how they wielded their control. This was how they kept you in a cage of their own making. They speak against you with lying tongues. They surround me with hateful words. Psalm 109:2. And then, the final blow, rewriting history. They didn't just attack your present. They tried to erase your past. Every moment of clarity you had, every step forward you took, they worked to make it seem like it had never happened. They would twist the narrative, edit the details, and erase the parts of the story that didn't fit into their version of events. They'd make you question everything you'd ever done, every choice you'd ever made, until you weren't sure what was real anymore. You'd start thinking, did that really happen? Was I really right? But the truth? The truth was, they were trying to erase your power, rewrite your story, and force you into a corner where you had no control over your own identity. They weren't just lying to you, they were lying to everyone. The manipulation was systemic, and the more they kept rewriting history, the more they hoped to bury your truth so deep that it would never see the light of day. But what they didn't realize was that truth doesn't stay buried forever. And when it finally surfaces, no amount of gaslighting, group pressure, or twisted narratives will be enough to keep it hidden. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. You might have questioned yourself, doubted your reality, and wondered if you were overreacting, but now, you see it clearly. The web they wove, the lies they told, the truth they tried to bury, it all starts to unravel, piece by piece. And when the truth does finally emerge, it will be undeniable. No gaslighting, no pressure, no rewriting of history will be able to hold it back. The truth is coming, and it will expose everything they tried to keep hidden. They threw everything at you. Every trick in the book, every dirty tactic they could think of. They thought they had found your breaking point. But the truth is, they never understood who they were dealing with. They tried to manipulate you, gaslight you, and isolate you, all while pretending to be your friend, pretending to care. They orchestrated whispers behind your back, planted seeds of doubt in your mind, and constructed a false reality where you were the problem. They tried to make you feel crazy, weak, unstable, but you didn't break. They pushed you to the edge, hoping you'd lose your composure, hoping you'd snap, and finally show them the weakness they were desperate to find. They wanted you to fight back, to lose control, to prove them right. But what they didn't anticipate was your ability to stay silent and still. They thought their tricks would wear you down. Their isolation would break your spirit, but instead, they made a fatal miscalculation. You became stronger. Every time they tried to knock you off balance, you grew more resolute. Every lie they spread, every attempt to paint you as the villain, only made you more determined to stand tall. They thought they could exhaust you, break your will, but instead, you found your power in the stillness. You adapted. You learned to rise above their games, to play by a different set of rules, your rules. You didn't need to engage in their drama, their manipulation. You didn't need to prove yourself. You just kept moving forward, quiet, focused, untouchable. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Isaiah 40:31. They kept pushing, trying every method they could to break you, but what they never understood was that they were not facing someone who could be easily controlled or shattered. You were not like them. You didn't need their approval, their validation, or their love. You were stronger than that. You had an inner strength they could never replicate, an unshakable foundation built on your resilience, your integrity, and your unwavering belief in yourself. So, what happened? They failed. All of their manipulation, all of their efforts to destroy you, were in vain. They couldn't break you. Instead, They only exposed their own flaws, their own insecurities, and their own weakness. You stood tall in the face of it all, untouched, unbroken, and stronger than they could ever imagine. They thought they could control your fate, but you were the one in control all along. And now, as they watch you rise, they're left wondering, how? How did they fail to break you? No weapon formed against you will prosper, and every tongue that accuses you in judgment, you will condemn. Isaiah 54:17. In the end, their efforts were futile. They tried everything, but you didn't just survive, you thrived. And that's what will haunt them. Because in trying to break you, they only made you more dangerous. The walls they built to keep you in the dark, the lies they carefully layered, the secret meetings they held to plan your demise, it was all supposed to stay hidden. They thought they had covered every angle, sealed every crack, and ensured that you'd never uncover the truth. But here's the thing about secrets. They always find a way to break free. And that's exactly what happened. The moment they feared the most arrived, and it started with the smallest crack. A slip of the tongue, a confession, a moment of weakness. One of them, burdened by guilt, exhausted from carrying the weight of their deception, finally cracked. They never expected it to happen this way. They thought they'd have control forever. They thought their web of lies would hold strong, their manipulation would be flawless. But one by one, the cracks started to appear. Someone, overwhelmed by the pressure, couldn't keep the lie going any longer. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was just the weight of carrying a lie too heavy to bear. Whatever the reason, someone broke. And when they did, it was like a floodgate opening. The truth, which had been buried deep, rushed to the surface. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. It didn't come all at once, but it didn't need to. The first crack was enough to start the domino effect. The pieces started to fall into place. The whispers, the lies, the manipulation, they all began to unravel. And as the truth emerged, it wasn't pretty. The carefully crafted narrative they had created was exposed for what it was, an intricate, malicious game designed to destroy you. But what they didn't count on was how the truth would spread once it was out there. It couldn't be contained anymore. And once it started, there was no going back. They never expected someone to crack. They thought they had everyone locked in, but guilt, shame, and the weight of their own deceit became too much for one of them to bear. In a moment of weakness, they spilled the truth, and everything started to change. The lies that had been woven so tightly for so long began to fray. And suddenly, everything you had suspected, everything you had felt in your gut, started to make sense. The truth will set you free. John 8:32. As one truth emerged, the rest followed, each piece revealing the bigger picture they desperately tried to hide. You were no longer in the dark. The people who thought they were safe in their conspiracy were now exposed, left to deal with the aftermath of their own actions. But you were standing in the light of the truth, no longer blind to the games they played, no longer fooled by the false facades they wore. The shift had begun. The moment of revelation was upon you. The lies couldn't hold any longer. They thought their secret would remain buried forever, but someone's guilt, someone's exhaustion, was the key to unlocking everything. And now, you're seeing the truth in its full, ugly form. You've been waiting for this moment, whether you realized it or not. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be known. Luke 12:2. And now the truth is in your hands. The walls they built to keep you in the dark, the lies they carefully layered, the secret meetings they held to plan your demise, it was all supposed to stay hidden. They thought they had covered every angle, sealed every crack, and ensured that you'd never uncover the truth. But here's the thing about secrets. They always find a way to break free, and that's exactly what happened. The moment they feared the most arrived, and it started with the smallest crack. A slip of the tongue, a confession, a moment of weakness. One of them, burdened by guilt, exhausted from carrying the weight of their deception, finally cracked. They never expected it to happen this way. They thought they'd have control forever. They thought their web of lies would hold strong, their manipulation would be flawless. But one by one, the cracks started to appear. Someone, overwhelmed by the pressure, couldn't keep the lie going any longer. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was just the weight of carrying a lie too heavy to bear. Whatever the reason, someone broke. And when they did, it was like a floodgate opening. The truth, which had been buried deep, rushed to the surface. As one truth emerged, the rest followed, each piece revealing the bigger picture they desperately tried to hide. You were no longer in the dark. The people who thought they were safe in their conspiracy were now exposed, left to deal with the aftermath of their own actions. But you were standing in the light of the truth, no longer blind to the games they played, no longer fooled by the false facades they wore. The shift had begun. The moment of revelation was upon you. The lies couldn't hold any longer. They thought their secret would remain buried forever, but someone's guilt, someone's exhaustion, was the key to unlocking everything. And now, you're seeing the truth in its full, ugly form. You've been waiting for this moment, whether you realized it or not. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be known. Luke 12:2. And now the truth is in your hands. It all starts with whispers, quiet, almost imperceptible at first, but steadily growing louder with each passing day. The rumors, the side conversations, the hushed tones that you weren't meant to hear, but always did. You felt it in the air long before the truth came to light. The glances, the sudden silences, the way people would act like everything was fine when you walked into the room, only to watch them shift as soon as you left. You weren't paranoid. You weren't imagining things. The whispers were real, and they were everywhere. And then came the group chats, those digital war rooms, where your name was spoken more than you realized. Behind closed doors, they conspired, they plotted, and they whispered about you like you weren't even there. Do you think they know? Should we tell them? Those conversations, full of half-truths and outright lies, designed to manipulate and control the narrative they created about you. They were making decisions about your life while you were none the wiser, thinking that they were on your side. All the while they were carefully orchestrating your downfall. They thought it would stay hidden forever. They thought their secrecy would shield them from exposure. But what they didn't account for was the one thing they could never control. The truth. The truth, like a fire burning beneath the surface, can only be suppressed for so long before it bursts through the cracks. And once it starts to slip, it can't be stopped. Someone in their group cracked under the pressure, and the lies that had been so carefully protected began to spill out, piece by piece. What started as quiet whispers in dark corners soon became undeniable truths. The secret plans, the gaslighting, the lies they told to cover their tracks, all of it started to come to light. Those group chats they thought were secure, those private discussions where they plotted behind your back, suddenly became the very evidence that would expose their lies. Every message, every screenshot, every conversation they thought was safe now had the potential to ruin them. Their conspiracy had been laid bare, and now the truth was unstoppable. It's funny how quickly things unravel once the first thread is pulled. The moment someone cracked, the floodgates opened. The truth spilled out into the open, like water breaking through a dam. And suddenly, everything they tried to keep hidden was there for everyone to see. The lies, the manipulation, the deceit, it all came crashing down. They thought they could control the story, but they underestimated how powerful the truth really is. And now, as the whispers turn into loud, undeniable revelations, they are left to pick up the pieces. The lies they told, the stories they fabricated, are no longer a secret. The truth that was once buried is now at the forefront. For there is nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. The secret is out, and nothing can hide it now. It's as if a fog has lifted, and for the first time, everything clicks into place. All those moments you couldn't quite explain, all those instances where something felt off, they suddenly make sense. The pieces that once seemed like scattered fragments of confusion are now aligning, and you can finally see the bigger picture. It was never about you being paranoid. It was never about you imagining things. No, they were playing a game, and now you see the rules for what they really were. The passive-aggressive encouragement they disguised as support, those backhanded compliments that left you feeling more confused than empowered, become glaringly obvious now. It wasn't genuine concern or praise. It was a tool of control. A subtle form of manipulation to keep you questioning yourself, to make you feel inadequate, to make you second-guess your worth. You're doing great. For now, they'd say, smiling sweetly while secretly hoping you'd fall short. And those strange shifts in tone, the sudden coldness when you'd step into the room. The abrupt changes in their demeanor when they thought you weren't looking, now you see them for what they were. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was calculated. Their warmth was a performance, and their coldness was their true feeling slipping through. You were never the problem, they were, and their shifting tones were nothing more than an attempt to keep you off balance, to keep you guessing, and to keep you in a constant state of uncertainty. They tried to manipulate your perception of yourself so that they could control the narrative. But now, you see it clearly. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. Proverbs 15:3. The truth was always there, buried beneath layers of deceit. You just needed to shift your perception, to step back and see the signs they were too blinded by their own manipulation to notice. And now, you do. You see the passive-aggressive tactics they use to break you down, the subtle but deliberate efforts to undermine your confidence, and the way they shifted their behavior to keep you on edge. But what they didn't count on was you waking up. They thought they could keep you in the dark, make you doubt your reality, but the truth is too powerful to stay hidden for long. The moment of clarity has arrived, and it changes everything. You see their tactics for what they were, and more importantly, you see yourself for who you really are. Someone who didn't fall for their lies, someone who didn't crumble under their pressure. Now that you know the truth, you can never go back to the person you were before. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor concealed that will not be known. Luke 8:17. The shift in your perception is the moment you reclaim your power, the moment you understand that you were never the problem they were. And now, you hold the truth in your hands, unshakable, undeniable, and nothing, not their fake support, not their shifting tones, can take that from you. Here it is, the harsh truth that no one wanted to face, but it's staring them right in the face now. They didn't fear you because of your flaws or weaknesses. No, they feared you because of something much deeper, something much more dangerous, your freedom. They feared what they couldn't control, what they couldn't manipulate, and that was you. The very essence of who you are, the thing they tried so hard to suppress, was the thing that terrified them the most. It wasn't your mistakes, your insecurities, or your shortcomings that rattled them. It was your unpredictability, your ability to stay calm in the chaos they tried to create, your refusal to bend to their whims. You were never a pawn in their game, never someone who could be easily directed, shaped, or controlled by their subtle tactics. And that was a threat to them. Your authenticity, your strength, your ability to stand on your own 2 feet without needing their approval, it terrified them because it reminded them of everything they lacked. They wanted you to doubt yourself, to crumble under pressure, to look to them for validation, but you didn't. You stayed true to yourself. You didn't beg for their approval. You didn't feed into their narrative. And that, more than anything, made you dangerous. You were a force they couldn't control, and it drove them insane. They couldn't understand how someone so real, so unapologetically themselves, could exist without the need for validation from them. They couldn't control you, and that terrified them. For God gave us a spirit not of fear but of power and love and self-control. 2 Timothy 1-7. Every move they made, every whisper behind your back, every attempt to gaslight you, was because they feared you. They feared what you would become if you ever truly realized your own power. They feared that once you knew your worth, once you understood the strength you had within you, you would no longer need them. You would no longer be swayed by their manipulation. You would stand on your own, unshaken and unyielding. And the moment you realized it, the moment the scales fell from your eyes and you saw their game for what it really was, you stopped playing. You stopped looking to them for answers, stopped waiting for their approval. You reclaimed your power, your authenticity. And that's when the real fear began. Because they weren't afraid of your mistakes or your flaws. They were afraid of the truth that you were everything they could never control. Now, as they stand back, watching the truth unfold, they realize what they've lost. The one thing they couldn't bend to their will. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. What they didn't understand is that their attempts to control you only exposed their own weaknesses. They weren't fighting against your flaws. They were fighting against your freedom. They were fighting against your refusal to be owned, controlled, or manipulated by them. And now, with the truth out in the open, they are left with nothing but their own fears and insecurities, while you stand tall in your newfound strength, unbreakable and untouchable. They didn't just take a few shots at you and hope for the best. No, this was a strategic operation, a carefully orchestrated system designed to break you down, piece by piece. They didn't trust chance. They wanted control, and to get it, they needed structure. So they built a network of lies, a committee of conspirators, all working together in the shadows to tear you apart. And they did it under the guise of concern, under the illusion of just helping you out. But behind closed doors, they weren't helping you. They were plotting your destruction. They didn't trust just one person to break you. No, they needed a whole group to make sure you'd crack under the weight of their pressure. So they assembled their committee people who once pretended to be your allies, but were now working against you in secret. You didn't see it at first, because they didn't make it obvious. They didn't need to. They created a smooth, well-oiled machine where everyone played their part. One person would plant the seed of doubt. Another would fan the flames of insecurity. Someone else would spread the rumors. And they made sure it was all coordinated so that you'd never see the full picture. Just the small, fragmented pieces they allowed you to see. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Ephesians 6:12. Each member of this covert committee had their role, their job to make you feel like you were the problem. The quiet whispers, the sideways glances, the subtle digs, they were all part of the plan. They'd feed you little bits of concern, pretending to be worried about your well-being, when in fact, they were quietly waiting for you to falter. They didn't care about your growth. They didn't care if you succeeded. All they cared about was keeping you in a state of confusion, insecurity, and doubt. The longer they kept you off balance, the easier it would be to manipulate you, and the more they could chip away at your confidence until you were a shadow of the person you once were. And the worst part? They didn't even need to make their attacks direct. The committee didn't need to openly challenge you or confront you, they just needed to make sure everyone else did their part. They built a web of influence, a collective narrative, where everyone's words and actions worked together to isolate you and make you feel small. Each attack was like a drop of poison in a well, seemingly harmless at first, but over time, it would poison your mind, your spirit, and your perception of yourself. And while they were doing all of this, they were still acting like your friends, still pretending to care. They didn't need you to know. They just needed you to feel alone, feel like you were the one going crazy, that maybe they were right all along. A man who isolates himself, seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. Proverbs 18:1. The plan was always to break you from the inside out, to make you feel like you were fighting an invisible enemy, one that you couldn't even see, let alone defend yourself against. They wanted you to question your reality, to question your instincts, and most importantly, to question your own worth. But here's the part they didn't count on. You didn't break. You might have felt the weight of it, the pressure mounting, but you didn't cave. You didn't fold under the pressure they placed on you. Instead, you started to see the cracks in their system. You started to see their true faces behind the masks. The committee thought they had you figured out, that their well-coordinated attack would force you to crumble. But what they never expected was that you'd stand tall, even when the weight of their manipulation grew unbearable. What they didn't account for was your ability to step back, to observe, and to see through the lies they wove around you. Their system was designed to break you, but it only made you stronger. The more they tried to control you, the more you fought back, not with aggression, but with clarity. And in that clarity, you found your power. The system they built to destroy you became the very thing that exposed their weakness. The truth will set you free. John 8:32. This wasn't just about random attacks. This was calculated, cold, and deliberate. They didn't simply try to break you. They set out to destroy your very character, to warp the way others saw you, to rewrite your story so that you were the villain in their drama. The whispers? They weren't spontaneous. The rumors? Carefully crafted. The attacks on your integrity? Rehearsed, scripted, and rehearsed again, just to make sure they hit their mark. They were trying to build a version of you that wasn't you at all. They started small, of course, planting the seeds of doubt wherever they could. Did you notice how they reacted to that? That wasn't normal. I think they're hiding something. Have you noticed how they avoid certain topics? Sen. At first, these concerns seemed harmless, even innocuous. But slowly, they chipped away at your image, distorting the truth just enough so that people started to question your motives. The more they whispered, the more they made sure their narrative stuck. But here's the sick part: they didn't even need to be subtle. They had the power of numbers on their side. The group pressure, the collective reinforcement of these false stories, made the lies feel like truth. One voice was easy to ignore, but a chorus of whispers could reshape reality itself. And that was the plan. They have been deceived, for they are the ones who deceive themselves. James 1:22. Behind closed doors, they held meetings about you, strategic, calculated discussions where they rehearsed the narrative they would push to others. They didn't just talk about what you had done. They twisted it, exaggerated it, and made sure they had their story straight. They didn't want anyone to hear your side. They didn't want anyone to give you the benefit of the doubt. Instead, they made sure their rehearsed version of events was the only one that ever got shared. They turned your every action, every word, into evidence of something you weren't. They crafted a narrative where you were unstable, untrustworthy, and even dangerous. And here's the kicker: they practiced. They role-played scenarios, preparing responses to things you hadn't even said yet. They imagined the conversations you might have, the arguments they might start, and how they'd shut you down before you even had a chance to speak your truth. They made sure their narrative would hold up under scrutiny, convinced that if they just repeated it enough, they could convince the world you were someone you were not. The narrative they created wasn't just a lie, it was a weapon. And they were armed to the teeth, determined to use it to tear you apart. They stir up dissension, and their deceit is like a fire. Proverbs 16:27. What they didn't count on, though, was your ability to see through it. They thought their rehearsed narrative would hold up, that their words would be enough to turn people against you. But they didn't expect you to rise above their lies, to refuse to play the game they set for you. They didn't account for your ability to stand in your truth, your quiet strength in refusing to become the character they wrote for you. Every time they tried to manipulate the narrative, you grew stronger. Every time they tried to make you small, you became bigger. And that's where they went wrong. Because you weren't just surviving their attacks, you were transcending them. Their rehearsed narrative might have fooled others for a while, but it could never change the reality of who you are. It could never change your integrity, your character, your strength. The more they tried to tear you down, the more they exposed themselves. The very lies they spun to undermine you became the cracks that exposed their own weakness. And as the truth started to surface, the narrative they'd crafted began to collapse, piece by piece. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. In the end, their effort to rewrite your story only became their undoing. They thought they could control the narrative, but in reality, they were only digging their own graves. This wasn't just manipulation, it was psychological warfare. A game of strategy so insidious that they weren't just responding to what you did or said, they were preparing for what they expected you to say before you even said it. They practiced responses to things that hadn't even happened yet, shaping a reality that existed only in their twisted minds. And they did it with one goal in mind: to control you before you even had the chance to speak for yourself. Imagine this. They didn't just wait for you to react. No, they planned ahead. They role-played situations, rehearsed their responses, and prepared for your every move. They created scenarios in their heads where you'd slip up, where you'd defend yourself, where you'd expose yourself as the problem they wanted to paint you as. They crafted these imaginary conversations, built them up in their minds, and then crafted perfectly rehearsed responses to them. It wasn't enough to control the present, they needed to control your future responses too. So they prepared, anticipating what you might say and how they would twist it to suit their narrative. They plan evil against you. They devise wicked schemes. Psalm 10:2. They didn't just want to manipulate the moment. They wanted to manipulate the future. And they did it by creating a false narrative of who you were, what you believed, and how you'd react. When you didn't say what they expected, when you didn't act how they'd imagined you would, it threw them off. It exposed their game. And instead of admitting their fault, they doubled down on their rehearsed responses, hoping that if they just repeated the same narrative enough times, they could make everyone believe it. They didn't trust the natural flow of conversation or confrontation. They didn't want to hear your truth. They wanted to control your reaction. They didn't leave room for honest discourse. Instead, they prepared responses to your defenses, rehearsing how they'd shut you down when you attempted to stand up for yourself. It was as if they had already tried you and found you guilty in their minds, and now they were just looking for the perfect way to convince everyone else. They created a script where you were always the antagonist, always the problem, and every time you responded, they'd throw their rehearsed lines back at you, hoping you'd fall into their trap. They make their tongues as sharp as a serpent's. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Psalm 140:3. And the worst part? You never even had a chance. They built up their defense before you even had the opportunity to speak. They twisted your words, your actions, your very essence, into something that wasn't real. Every time you tried to set the record straight, they'd just redirect the conversation to fit the script they had written. You were always one step behind, because they had anticipated your every move, had prepared the perfect comeback, had engineered the perfect rebuttal. And they played this game, not because they cared about the truth, but because they were afraid of losing control over you. What they didn't realize, though, was that the more they tried to control your narrative, the more they exposed themselves. Every rehearsed response, every well-crafted lie, became another crack in their carefully constructed facade. Every time they tried to manipulate you with their preordained responses, they revealed the fear that motivated them, the fear of losing control. The moment you realized this, you gained an upper hand they could never have anticipated. You became unpredictable, unbreakable, and they were left scrambling to keep up, trapped in the very web of lies they had spent so much time spinning. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Luke 12:2. In the end, their psychological warfare became their downfall. They tried to control every aspect of the conversation, but in doing so, they revealed just how little they understood you. They weren't fighting the person you were, they were fighting the version of you they had created in their heads. And that false image? It crumbled the moment you stepped into your truth, no longer bound by their rehearsed lines or their twisted manipulations. They prepared for you to fail, but instead, you rose above it all, stronger than they ever expected. Here's the bitter pill that hits hardest, the realization that everything you thought was real, every conversation, every reaction they had, wasn't actually about you at all. They weren't reacting to the person you truly are. They were responding to a character they created in their minds. A distorted version of you, carefully constructed to justify their actions and fuel their narrative. They painted you as something you were not. They needed you to fit into their script. So they created a caricature of you, someone unstable, unpredictable, difficult, and untrustworthy. Every move they made, every word they spoke, was based on this imagined version of you. The funny thing is, you never even had the chance to be you. From the moment they began spinning their lies, they stopped seeing the real you. Instead, they saw their own fears and insecurities reflected back in a version of you that wasn't even close to reality. And yet, they held on to that fabricated version of you because it gave them power. For they speak not peace, but against those who are quiet in the land. Psalm 35-20. You weren't responding to their attacks, their whispers, their gaslighting. You were responding to their perception of you. Every time you defended yourself, every time you tried to explain your actions or intentions, it was like speaking to a wall. They didn't hear you. They heard the version of you they had imagined, the one that was built on their assumptions, their judgments, their need to control. They never let you be yourself, because that was dangerous to their fragile narrative. So instead of engaging with the real you, they interacted with their false version of you, constantly manipulating it, distorting it, and using it as a weapon against you. This is where the manipulation becomes truly sinister. They didn't need to attack your real character, they just needed to attack the fake one they created. And once they had that version of you locked in their minds, they used it as the basis for every conversation, every criticism, every attempt to tear you down. It wasn't about who you were, what you believed, or how you felt. It was about maintaining control over the version of you they had carefully fabricated in their heads. They have made their faces harder than stone. They have refused to repent. Jeremiah 5-3. The more you tried to set the record straight, the more they dug in their heels. The more you tried to show them who you really were, the more they clung to the image they had built. And that's where they made their fatal mistake. They never listened. They couldn't hear you because they had already decided who you were. They couldn't see you because they had already painted you into a corner. The truth was never going to make it through because they had created a world where only their lies could exist. But the moment you realized this, that they weren't responding to you, but to a character they had fabricated, everything shifted. You stopped fighting for their approval. You stopped trying to explain yourself to people who were never interested in the truth. You stopped feeding into their narrative and allowed their own lies to unravel. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. In that moment, you found your power. Because once you see the game for what it really is, once you understand that they were never engaging with the real you, but with their own distorted version of you, you can finally step out of the trap they set for you. You stop playing by their rules. You stop fighting for validation from people who never saw you for who you truly are. And when you stop playing their game, they have nothing left to control you with. You were never the problem, they were. And once you see that, you can never be fooled again. They didn't just play one role in your life, they played multiple. On the surface, they showed up with a mask of warmth, pretending to be your friend, your ally, your confidant. They greeted you with smiles, gave you compliments, and made sure to check in with you, all while secretly working against you behind the scenes. You thought you were surrounded by people who had your best interests at heart, but what you didn't know was that they were leading double lives, smiling in your face while plotting your downfall behind your back. Every word of kindness, Every moment of attention they gave you was calculated. It wasn't genuine concern, it was performance. They wore their fake warmth like a costume, hiding their true intentions beneath layers of lies. And you, caught in the illusion, believed it. You thought they were there for you. But all along, they were simply playing their part in a game you didn't even know you were part of. Their friendliness, their attention, their so-called support was all an act, designed to keep you off balance and unaware of the dark game they were playing. They speak with flattering lips, but their hearts are full of deceit. Psalm 12:2. The worst part? They didn't even care that their fake warmth didn't match their true feelings. In fact, it was necessary for them to maintain the act. They needed you to believe in their affection and loyalty because it was the only way they could maintain control over you. They wanted you to stay dependent on their approval, reliant on their fake kindness, so you would never question them. They needed you to feel safe in their presence, while they carefully crafted the trap they had set for you. But behind that mask, there was a darker reality. They were suppressing their guilt, all while continuing to control you. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew the lies they were telling were destroying trust, but they didn't care. Why? Because maintaining control over you was more important than facing the truth. They couldn't afford to feel guilty, couldn't afford to let their emotions get in the way of the plan. So, they buried their guilt deep inside, locking it away to keep their control intact. The more they suppressed that guilt, the more they became trapped in their own lies. And the pressure was mounting. The facade was becoming harder to maintain. The wicked man flees though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Proverbs 28:1. The weight of the lie became too much to bear. They couldn't keep up the act forever. The guilt, the anxiety, the pressure of maintaining their fake personas, it all started to build up. And eventually, something had to give. The cracks started to show. They were exhausted from living a double life, drained from keeping up appearances, and terrified of the truth ever coming to light. And eventually, they couldn't suppress it any longer. Someone, one of them, maybe someone you never expected, finally cracked. The truth spilled out in a moment of weakness, a crack in their carefully constructed armor. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. It was a quiet slip, a confession made under the weight of too much guilt, too much fear. But that one slip was all it took to start unraveling everything. They had carefully woven a web of lies, but now the threads were starting to snap. And the moment that one piece of the puzzle fell into place, everything started to collapse. Be sure your sin will find you out. Numbers 32-23. The truth they worked so hard to bury couldn't be hidden anymore. Their deception unraveled as quickly as it had been built. And in an instant, the mask they wore was ripped off. They were exposed for who they truly were. People who had no problem pretending to care while actively working to destroy the very person they pretended to support. They thought they could control the narrative, manipulate you, and hide behind their lies forever. But in the end, it was their own guilt and the pressure of maintaining their fake lives that tore them apart. They cracked under the weight of their own deception, and now the truth was out. The game was over, and they couldn't hide behind their masks any longer. The power had shifted, the battle had turned, and you were standing there, watching the illusion collapse, knowing that the truth had finally prevailed. For everything that is hidden will eventually be brought into the open, and every secret will be brought to light. Luke 8:17. It all comes down to this moment, the point when the truth can no longer be ignored, the point when the lies are laid bare, and there's no longer any room for denial. Their deception wasn't just a series of whispered lies or carefully constructed stories. It was documented, recorded, and tracked. The screenshots, the emails, the messages, they thought these would be their hidden weapons, tools to control the narrative, evidence they could use to keep you in the dark. But all those pieces of evidence they thought were safe? They became the